The rains had just ended in Imo State, and the red earth shone under the fading sun. In the village of Umachoke, people whispered about a strange omen. They said a woman's cry had pierced the night, echoing from the sacred forest. But no one dared to go in and find out. That cry, they believed, belonged to the restless spirit of a wronged girl. Yet one family knew the truth was much closer to home. Obiageli and Ifeoma were sisters, born just a year apart. Obiageli was calm, thoughtful, and obedient. Ifeoma had fire in her blood. Villagers often remarked that the two sisters were like day and night. Their mother, Mama Nkechi, prayed endlessly for peace in their home. Beneath the ordinary life of the village, a quiet rivalry brewed, sharper than a machete, and it was bound to spill over in unexpected ways. That night, when the moon rose high, Obiageli's faint cry carried across the huts. Earlier, she had been seen walking by the river, where maidens fetched water at dusk. When she didn't return, Mama Nkechi panicked, calling for help. Men grabbed lanterns, women tightened their wrappers against their chests, and soon the whole village began to search. But as they combed through the bush, they found only Ifeoma, standing silently by the riverbank, her eyes glinting in the dim moonlight. "What happened here?" the elders demanded. Ifeoma simply pointed toward the dark river, her face unreadable. Some swore they heard a splash, others whispered that the river goddess had taken her. Yet even in silence, the sound of Obiageli's cry lingered, heavy and haunting. Something felt wrong. Though Ifeoma had given no answer, her stillness spoke louder than words. The village was unsettled, left grasping at fragments of fear. This was no ordinary disappearance, and everyone recognized that. In Umachoke, nothing stayed buried for long. Secrets had a way of clawing their way back to the surface. But the question lingered in every trembling heart. If Obiageli had cried for help, why had her sister chosen silence? No one dared to confront Ifeoma that night, but deep inside, the first crack in their fate had begun to spread. Morning broke with restless whispers. The cock crowed, but instead of the usual laughter of children running to fetch firewood, silence clung to Umachoke like a heavy shroud. Women gathered in clusters, their wrappers tied firmly across their chests. The men sharpened cutlasses nervously, as if bracing for war. The mystery of Obiageli's disappearance gnawed at the village's soul. But all eyes kept circling back to Ifeoma, who moved about with unsettling calm. Mama Nkechi's voice carried through the compound, sharp and cracked with grief. "Where is my child? Where is my Obiageli?" she wailed, her knees striking the red earth. Neighbors tried to console her, but even their words trembled. Grief in Umachoke was never private. It spread like wildfire, igniting suspicion and fear. In this case, the flame pointed dangerously toward Ifeoma, whose silence the night before still clung to her like a second skin. The elders called for a gathering beneath the Irako tree, the great tree that stood at the heart of the village. Men and women filled the clearing, their faces tense, the smell of palm wine and dust mingling in the morning air. "We must know what happened by the river," declared Chief Eek, his voice booming. "If Obiageli has been taken, whether by spirits or men, the truth must be spoken today." All eyes turned toward Ifeoma. She stood tall, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her gaze steady. "I saw her walk into the water," she said calmly, each word measured. A gasp rippled through the crowd. She called out once, but before I could move, the river swallowed her. I ran to call for help, but by then it was too late. Her explanation flowed smoothly, yet left the villagers unsettled. Some believed her. Others whispered that a sister would never stand still if blood called for rescue. "Why didn't you jump in?" Mama Nkechi screamed, pounding her chest. Ifeoma said nothing more, her eyes darting briefly toward the forest. Something about her story didn't sit right, and the villagers felt it. In Imo State, truth had a strange way of wearing masks until the right moment tore them away. Night returned with heavy clouds covering the moon. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but no rain fell. In the huts of Yumachoke, lamps flickered weakly as shadows crawled across mud walls. People struggled to sleep, but whispers of Obiagili's cry haunted everyone. Even the crickets seemed restless. Mama Nkechi sat outside her hut, rocking back and forth as she called her daughter's name like a broken drumbeat. Ifeoma stayed inside, silent, her face hidden from the firelight. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. Mama, will Obiagili come back? Papa, why didn't her sister save her? Elders quickly hushed them, spitting 3 times on the ground to chase away spirits. Still, doubts lingered. Ifeoma's tale of the river spirit felt too neat and convenient. Some remembered how the sisters often quarreled, how jealousy grew between them like stubborn weeds. In Imo State, sibling rivalry was serious. It could bring disaster. The following morning, hunters preparing for the bush heard something strange. Near the riverbank, tangled in reeds, lay a piece of torn cloth. The colors matched Obiagili's, the faded green and yellow fabric she wore that evening. The hunters brought it back to the village with serious voices. Gasps filled the air as Mama Nkechi clutched the fabric to her chest and wailed again. The cloth proved that Obiagili had been there. But still, there was no body. Only silence. Chief Eek ordered a cleansing ritual. If spirits are involved, we must soothe them. If men are guilty, the gods will reveal them. A goat was tied to the irako tree, palm fronds woven into circles, and kola nuts placed in a calabash. But when the dibia, the village priest, cast his cowries onto the ground, the shells scattered oddly, pointing towards the sisters' compound. Murmurs spread like dry harmattan fire. Suspicion fell on one person, Ifeoma. That night, while others prayed, Ifeoma walked alone to the riverbank. Her feet sank into the damp earth, and her breath quickened. "Why now?" she whispered into the darkness. A splash echoed, although no one was near. Some believed the river goddess demanded sacrifices. Others feared Ifeoma's secret was bigger than anyone suspected. The truth lingered like a shadow, waiting for dawn to pull back the veil. And Yumachoke prepared for the storm it could feel approaching. The dawn that followed was thick with mist, as if the heavens were hesitant to show what lay ahead. The villagers gathered again, this time with fear on their faces instead of torches. Children stayed indoors, while women tightened their wrappers, preparing for a storm. Even the elders spoke in low voices. Something unseen hunted Yumachoke, and the name on everyone's lips, though not spoken, was Ifeoma. Mama Nkechi sat like a rock in her compound. Her hair, once neat, now hung messily around her face. Neighbors tried to comfort her, but her heart was aching. "I want my child, dead or alive," she repeated over and over. Meanwhile, Ifeoma sat apart, grinding cassava with calm, deliberate movements. Some believed her detachment showed strength. Others whispered it was guilt hiding in plain sight. Her silence became more threatening than any words could be. That afternoon, the dibia was called upon once more. The villagers demanded answers. "If Obiagili has been taken by spirits, tell us. If her blood was spilled by humans, let that be known," the chief said. The dibia sprinkled white chalk on the ground, then threw burning herbs into the fire. Smoke spiraled up, thick and suffocating. As he chanted, the flames rose high, and in the crackle of the fire, a voice seemed to call out. The villagers froze. The voice was faint and trembling, but clear. I called for help. It whispered through the smoke, sending chills down their spines. Mama Nkechi screamed, ripping her wrapper in despair. "That is Obiagili. That is my daughter's voice." The Dibia stumbled back, sweat running down his face. He shook his head slowly. The river goddess has not taken her. This is the cry of blood wronged by family. His words spread fear like poison in water. Eyes turned back to Iphioma. Instead of fear, she stood tall, her jaw clenched. Believe what you want, she said, her voice low but firm. But know this, truth will come when the river speaks again. Her words lingered, sharp and unsettling. The villagers gasped. Was she warning them or confessing? No one knew. In that moment, Yumachok realized the sisters' bond was darker than anyone had dared to imagine. Dark clouds gathered above Yumachok. The sky was heavy with a storm that refused to break. The villagers moved about uneasily. Every sound felt amplified, the creak of bamboo doors, the distant call of a palm wine tapper, the restless bleating of goats. Beneath it all, one question pulsed like a drumbeat. What had really happened to Obiageli? And why did Iphioma walk with such strange, unwavering confidence when doubt seemed to linger around her? That evening, the elders returned to the river, determined to search again. Young men waded in waist-deep, poking with long sticks. Women stood by the bank, clutching rosaries and charms. Suddenly, one of the men shouted. From the muddy water, he pulled up a necklace, bright beads strung together with a cowrie shell in the center. Gasps filled the air. Everyone knew it belonged to Obiageli. She had worn it every day since her initiation dance. Mama Nkechi collapsed at the sight, wailing uncontrollably. Chinik, my child, where are you? She screamed. Women held her back as she clawed at the necklace, sobbing until her throat was raw. As people mourned, their eyes shifted toward Iphioma. Her face remained unreadable, but for a brief moment, a flicker of something crossed her eyes, perhaps fear or regret. Few noticed, but those who did whispered heatedly among themselves. That night, the rain finally fell. It pounded the thatched roofs, drumming relentlessly, and washed through the village streets. But even in the storm, voices rose, voices filled with suspicion, anger, and fear. Why didn't she dive in? Why does she sleep peacefully while her mother weeps? The questions sharpened into accusations. Iphioma was watched closely, every step scrutinized. Some believed she was cursed. Others claimed she was hiding a terrible secret. By dawn, the whispers had turned into a plan. The elders decided Iphioma would be taken before the shrine of Allah, the earth goddess, to swear her innocence. In Imo State, no one dared lie before Allah. She punished deceit with madness or death. Iphioma did not protest. Instead, she lifted her chin and spoke calmly, "Take me to the shrine. Let Allah judge between truth and lies." Her boldness sent shivers down everyone's spine. The morning sun rose weakly, its light blocked by thick gray clouds. The villagers gathered, silent and tense, as Iphioma was led to the shrine of Allah. The path wound through dense forest. The smell of damp earth filled the air. Birds scattered as the crowd moved, and every footstep echoed with dread. Before the great clay shrine, adorned with chalk drawings and palm fronds, the people stood, waiting for the goddess to reveal the truth. The Dibia's voice rose in chants, calling upon Allah, the guardian of truth and the keeper of justice. A pot of palm wine was poured into the ground. Kola nuts were cracked and scattered, and a cock's blood spilled onto the shrine floor. Iphioma stepped forward, her wrapper clinging to her skin, her eyes focused straight ahead. She did not tremble. She did not look back at Mama Nkechi, whose sobs shook like leaves in the wind. The Dibia handed Iphioma a small clay bowl filled with sacred water. "Swear before Allah," he commanded, his eyes penetrating her soul. "Swear that you did not harm your sister, Obiageli." The villagers leaned forward, breaths held, hearts racing. Iphioma lifted the bowl with steady hands, the water rippling but never spilling. "By Allah who watches all," she said clearly, "I did not harm my sister. If I lie, let the earth consume me." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some gasped at her bravery, while others trembled in doubt. Suddenly, the ground under the shrine shook faintly, as if responding to her words. Women screamed, clutching their children, and men stumbled back. But the tremor passed quickly. Silence followed, thick and heavy. The Dibbia's face darkened with confusion. "Allah has spoken," he said, "but her answer is not complete. The truth lies deeper than this oath." As the villagers scattered, unease stayed. Some felt Ifeoma's innocence had been proven, while others claimed Allah was simply delaying judgment. Mama Nkechi refused to be comforted, her voice breaking the night. "Where is my daughter? Where is my Obiageli?" Still, Ifeoma said nothing more, her silence deepening the mystery. But beneath her calm mask, secrets pressed against her chest, waiting for the right moment to burst free. Days passed, but the tension in Yumachoke grew heavier. The villagers moved like shadows, watching Ifeoma with suspicious eyes whenever she walked the narrow paths. Market women went silent when she approached, and children were pulled away from her as if she carried a curse. Yet Ifeoma endured it all without flinching. Her silence acted as armor, but inside her chest a storm brewed. Every night, the river whispered louder, drawing her deeper into its pull. One evening, hunters returning from the bush found something chilling. By the river's edge, caught between roots, lay a calabash half buried in mud. When they pried it open, they discovered strands of braided hair, still damp, tied with a piece of red cloth. Gasps filled the air. The villagers recognized such things belonged to charms, dangerous ones meant to bind life and spirit. When Mama Nkechi saw the hair, she collapsed. It was Obiageli's, unmistakable and sacred. The discovery spread quickly. "Who put this here? What does it mean?" The elders gathered again, demanding answers. Suspicion tightened around Ifeoma because the hair connected directly to her missing sister. But Ifeoma stood her ground, her eyes flashing like sparks. "Do you think I'm foolish enough to hide charms where anyone could find them?" she asked coldly. Her words struck deep, but doubts lingered. The people wanted more than denial, they craved a confession. That night, thunder crashed again. Mama Nkechi dreamed of Obiageli, her daughter standing at the river's edge, dripping wet, whispering, "Ask her why she watched." She woke screaming, sweat soaking her wrapper. Her cries echoed through the village until neighbors rushed in. "It was not a dream," she insisted, clutching her chest. "My daughter's spirit calls for justice. Ifeoma knows something she has hidden." The weight of her words deepened the villagers' unease. By dawn, the elders announced a final trial. The Dibbia would call upon the ancestors, not just Allah, to reveal what happened. In Yumachoke, spirits never lied, and no mortal could escape their judgment. Ifeoma accepted without protest, her chin raised. But as she walked away, a flicker of pain crossed her eyes, gone in an instant. The truth was circling closer, and everyone felt it, like a storm waiting to break the sky open. The shrine of the ancestors stood at the edge of Yumachoke, with carved wooden figures guarding its entrance. Their eyes were hollow but piercing. That morning, the entire village gathered. Their voices were hushed, and their steps were careful. The air was heavy with incense and dread. This was no ordinary ritual. When the ancestors were called, lies crumbled like termite-eaten wood. Ifeoma stood in the center. Her wrapper was tied firmly, and her gaze was unblinking, as though she dared the spirits to speak. The Dibbia raised his staff, decorated with feathers and cowries, and began his chant. The ground quivered faintly as drums beat in rhythm, echoing like distant thunder. Palm oil was poured, cola was cracked, and a white cock was slaughtered, its blood staining the earth. Ancestors of Umachok, the Dibia cried, "Reveal what happened to Obiageli, daughter of Mamankechi. If her sister is guilty, let her shadow confess. If not, let the truth still rise." Silence fell. Then the fire in the shrine flared suddenly, leaping high into the air. A voice, faint but piercing, drifted through the smoke. Called. I cried. The villagers gasped and clutched one another. Mamankechi collapsed to her knees, wailing. The voice grew louder, trembling with pain. She watched me drown. She did not move. She let the river swallow me. The words struck like a blade. Every gaze turned sharply to Ifeoma. Her face cracked for the first time. She staggered and clutched her chest, her composure shattering like broken clay. "I did not push her," she cried, her voice raw. "I only watched. I froze. I could not move. The river pulled her away before I could act. I swear it." Her words hung in the air, caught between defense and confession. The villagers murmured furiously, torn between pity and rage, between sorrow and disgust. The Dibia raised his hand for silence. "The ancestors have spoken." Ifeoma's hands did not strike, but her heart chose silence when action was needed. Her guilt is not of blood, but of spirit. The crowd roared, some demanding punishment and others pleading for mercy. Mamankechi's sobs rose above them all. The truth had surfaced, but peace remained far from Umachok. Silence could kill too, and its wound cut deeper than any blade. The days after the revelation were heavy with grief. Mamankechi refused to eat, her body wasting away as though sorrow itself was consuming her. Women gathered to sing dirges in her compound, their voices echoing across the village like a broken wind. Ifeoma moved like a shadow, shunned by neighbors and watched by children who whispered behind her back. Though she was alive, it felt as if death had marked her. Silence had become her curse. The elders met to decide her fate. Some called for banishment, saying that a sister who failed to save blood was no better than a murderer. Others argued that fear was a chain no one could break. They believed Ifeoma's crime was a matter of the heart, not of the hand. For hours, they debated, their voices rising and falling like restless waves. In the end, they left the decision to Mamankechi, for she had suffered the most. When Mamankechi spoke, her voice trembled but burned with intensity. "I bore you both. One is gone, the other remains. Ifeoma, I cannot kill you, but I cannot forgive you either. You will live with this silence, and may every cry you ignored echo in your dreams." Her words landed like a curse, heavier than chains. Ifeoma bowed her head, tears slipping down her face, her first since Obiageli's disappearance. That night, the river swelled under the moonlight, its waters whispering against the bank. Villagers claimed they heard Obiageli's cry once more, soft and distant, carried on the wind. Ifeoma stood at the edge, staring into the dark waters, her reflection rippling back at her. She whispered, "Sister, forgive me," but the river offered no answer. Only the restless croak of frogs and the rustling of trees responded, leaving her soul hollow and haunted. And so the tale of the sisters spread beyond Umachok, told around firesides across Imo State. Children learned that silence can wound deeper than words, and hesitation can kill just as surely as violence. Yet one question lingers still: when your blood cries for help, what choice will you make? The choice that saves, or the silence that destroys? If this story unsettled your heart, dare yourself to listen to the next tale, but only if you're ready. Share this story with someone who loves stories. Join us as we bring more African folktales to life. Subscribe so you won't miss the next interesting story.